What is up, everyone? My name is Adam with the Lavin Real Estate Group and Next Home Synergy. And I'm talking specifically today to people that are looking to downsize their home or the children often of people that are looking to downsize their home, or it's coming up on that time. And I want to talk to you about 5 things to think about and consider as your family starts to go through this process. It's an exciting time. Obviously, it's always an exciting time, but it's also a lot to take in, sort of, when you're making such a big transition at that part of life. And so that is why the number one thing that we need to remember when we're talking about downsizing homes is that it's a process. So if you are the family member of the person or couple that is looking to downsize their home, that's the number one thing to understand for yourself, and also help them to understand, is that it's a process. It's not something that should be done overnight, and it's almost not even something that you should be worrying too much about money when you get into this point. If you're talking to a real estate agent or anybody in the industry that's telling you like right now is the best time to sell the house because it's the most money you're ever going to make, to a point that's true. But when you're dealing with this, a lot of times people that are, in 2022 today, people that are selling their house to downsize at this point and kind of move on to the last phase of life, they've probably owned the home since the 80s or 90s. The home is probably paid off, or if not completely paid off, almost completely paid off. They probably have more equity in this house than they ever anticipated having when they originally purchased the house. And so will the market fluctuate depending on the price bracket by $10,000 or $20,000? It might. But after all that time, that's really not the biggest thing we need to focus on at this point. And the biggest thing to really focus on is that it is a process. There are a lot of memories that people have in their house when they're at this point of downsizing. The memories of purchasing the house, sometimes they purchased it before they had kids, and then while they were in the house, maybe they weren't married yet and they got married. They had their first kid, maybe another kid, animals sometimes, and pets. They might have had grandchildren that were there as well. And so, although, as the children or the family members, I'm sure we look at the house as something that has great memories in it. For the people that live there, they have more memories than anybody. And so it's super important to understand that there is a huge emotional process to all this. Not only just letting go of the house itself, but also letting go of the memories that are attached to that house that ultimately do come with you, but it's hard to separate that. And then also all the things that are in the house. When we're talking about downsizing, and we'll get into this in the next step, it goes without saying that there's probably the situation we're going to have to let go of some things, and that's difficult as well. You don't realize it, and sometimes that brings up a whole nother wave of emotions that you don't really anticipate dealing with. And so, the best thing to do is understand that it's a process, and set goals for yourself, because what you don't want to do is just say like, hey, mom and dad, or, if you're talking as a couple and you're downsizing, we should probably think about doing this, and you don't put any goals and timelines and deadlines to it. Typically what happens is the emotions come up and it all becomes overwhelming, and it just keeps getting put off. Not with ill intention, but it just keeps getting put off. And unfortunately, what happens in that scenario is when it just gets put off forever, is life often takes us by surprise, and now we're forced to deal with this situation of selling the home in probably a time where we don't necessarily have all the emotional and mental capacity to deal with it. And so it's not as good of a situation as it can be if we just take it as a process and deal with it ahead of time when we have time. So the best thing you could do is sit down as a family or a couple and look at what you have to deal with and sort of set timelines and goals for yourself. And we'll talk about the areas that you might want to think about in setting timelines and goals for yourself next. But come up with what's realistic for you. Some people have the mindset of like, let's go, and some people need a little bit more time to process. So and even within the couple, there's sometimes is a split in dynamic. So really think about what's fair for everyone involved. Be gracious towards it, and set some timelines and deadlines for yourself and try to stick to them as best as possible, and start the process and realize it's not going to be something that happens overnight. And also don't let it become something that is happening overnight because somebody's pushing you or them through the process. So the next step or the next thing that I would suggest that you do is an in-home consultation with a real estate agent. And the reason why I say that is because they'll give you an idea of what needs to be done. And I would probably, interview the agents that you talk to and see how much experience they have in a downsizing process, and, ask for specific examples. That way, it's not like, well, yeah, no problem, I can do it. Because it's a unique situation, and it's not for somebody that's money hungry. It's really for somebody that's willing to work with your family through the process, and make sure that they have all the right contacts to help you out along the way. So the big reasons why you want to have an in-home consultation is, one, you can have an outside perspective of what needs to be done and the best way to do it. Because sometimes when you're in the house all the time and you don't even realize all the things that you have, you don't really even know where to start. And what this does is it gives you free option up front, at least, to meet with somebody that is used to doing this on a regular basis, and they can walk through with you and give you some suggestions as to, like, maybe you should do this first and then this and then this, and we can create a unique plan that works for you and your personalities and the living environment that you're in, as well as your financial objectives, obviously. And the other part is you can understand where your home stands in terms of the market. So you will understand how much you can probably expect to walk away with, what fees are involved in the modern day in terms of selling a house, how the closing process works, as that's changed quite a bit over the last several years, and then any repairs that would need to be made to pass any inspections or permits or anything like that, and then also any upgrades you might want to do in order to increase your property value. And that way you can kind of plan for those as you're going through this process. So that will, to me, that's the best thing to do, is to meet with a real estate agent. You're bringing in somebody that works with every part of it, and you can kind of build that relationship and have somebody to go to on a regular basis, and not have to, worry about too many feelings if you're asking, a lot of times family and friends have too many opinions, and this will give you an unbiased opinion as to what needs to be done. And they can also help you with your timeline as to what's realistic and what's not realistic, and you can kind of combine heads and go from there. And sometimes these things take a year and a half or so. It can happen obviously overnight if you needed it to, but it gives you time and a good idea of what needs to be done and where it needs to be done, and if we're going to go that far out, where the market might be in that time frame. So the next thing to think about, and the reason why I said, is that you should probably talk to a real estate agent as well, and somebody that's used to this, is you want to realistically think about what your next 1 to 2 moves are going to look like. If you're moving out of state, if you're staying in state, you want to make sure that you're working with somebody that can also work with another partner out of state to make sure that your transition is as smooth as possible. The other thing that you want to think about is ultimately the size and style of the house that you're going to move in, and having that outside perspective will kind of help you get a better idea of what's going to fit in that house, because sometimes we don't realize how much stuff we have and how far down we might have to condense it. And if our next move is into the next house, does it really make financial sense to purchase that house? Does it make financial sense that it is a house? Should it be a condo perhaps? Should it be a rental type situation? There's no good right or wrong reason, and although as a real estate agent I would love to continue to sell your family all the houses in the world, my job's also to give my advice, at least, or my perspective on what is the best move for you, from what I can tell, and what your goals are. And so sometimes we can find a scenario where, hey, we just need to purchase a smaller house. Sometimes it needs to be a standalone house. Sometimes it needs to be in an active lifestyle community. Sometimes it needs to be a condo. Sometimes it just needs to be a rental type situation because we don't know what our the timeline on the next move is. Or are we moving into an assisted living type situation, in which case you want to make sure that you have somebody that has contacts with that and can kind of at least open your eyes to the different types of scenarios there, because the structures of how those are ran vary from location to location as well, so you can kind of get feedback from there as well. But that's kind of the other thing we want to think about when we're making our initial plan is like, okay, well, our next move, obviously we're going to sell this house and move somewhere. Where are we moving? And realistically, how long is how long are we going to be able to live there? What does our financial situation look like? And what is going to be the best thing for us and our family moving forward into this next phase of life? Number 4 is once you kind of get through all that and you're starting to work through everything and condense everything and understand how it all works, and you've put together a game plan, you are going to want to come up with a plan for the things that you're not going to take with you. Now, sometimes people have a lot of family and the family wants to keep items in the family as heirlooms, and pass them down to kids, grandkids, whatever the relationship might be, friends, family, neighbors. So put a plan together there as to who's going to take what, and if it's a situation where everybody's okay and nobody really wants anything, separate that into what can be donated, what just needs to go away and is not usable, and then also what might be considered an antique and we can get appraised so that we can make more money to put towards your next move or towards your family's financial betterment in the long term, and kind of build a legacy out of that. So within that planning, this is a little bit further down the line, but it's something that we want to think about in the overall scope of everything, is all of our stuff. What are we doing with it? Do we have anything that's special? I worked with one gentleman that owned a great guitar collection, and it ended up, we got him in contact with the right person that bought the entire thing, and it ended up making his family quite a substantial fund that I believe they're using for their children's college fund now. So sometimes you don't realize what dad or grandpa has laying around in the room that you just walk past every day can really be worth a lot of money, and something that they don't necessarily want and you're not necessarily interested in. Sometimes that hobby or artifact that they carried around with them can now be transitioned and alchemized into something else in life. And then the last thing that we really need to think about, and everybody's different, but we really need to think about, have we talked to attorneys, CPAs, financial planners, to really make sure that we're making the right decisions and that we have all of our ducks in a row, essentially. Now, some people, have done this all of their lives to a point. Some people kind of have and they haven't. What I strongly suggest is that we kind of put all of our egos aside during this situation. Everybody's situation is unique. It can't be a thing where, I'll just research it on YouTube, or, I already know everything about it. It's not the best thing to do. I would strongly suggest, putting together a team You don't have to pay them in the long run, but paying them for their opinion financially or legally as to the best situation for your situation is really worth its weight in gold. It'll put your mind at ease about questions that you had. It might bring up things that you didn't even consider. And ultimately, when we're making this type of move, we'll make the best tax shelter and best move for your family, and to make sure that all the money that you've put into this house over all this time doesn't get lost along the way and float off to Uncle Sam, and that it's also protected for you and your family into this next phase of life. So that's really the biggest things to think about. Beyond that, during my, if you need a home consultation, please call me or let me know. Within there, I do help you come up with a kind of step-by-step plan that'll help you with your timeline and maybe point out some things that you didn't think about, and kind of walk you through the entire process. So, there may be questions that you have that you're like, well, why didn't he talk about this, or why didn't he talk about that? It's very unique depending on the type of property that you have or number of properties that you might have. And also, what your goals are financially and then also timeline-wise. So I'd love to be able to get the chance to talk to you and your family and see how I can best help. But I wanted to get some of these ideas out to you so that way, before you get to the step where you're mentally ready to speak to me or another real estate agent, you can at least, kind of get an idea of where we need to start and what we need to do, and begin the initial conversations, because the initial conversations of is it time to do this is really the beginning of the process. I'm a little bit further down the road in that process. So I hope everything is going well for you and your family. If you need anything, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. You can call or text me. My number is 610-442-9371, or you can email me at the email address below. I thank you so much for watching this today. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to being there for you when you need me.